The morning sun had just risen over Atlanta's skyline when Sarah Collins's alarm buzzed at 6:30 a.m. Although she wasn't expected in court until 9 a.m., her years as a federal prosecutor had taught her the importance of preparation. Her downtown Atlanta apartment reflected her organized nature, with case files neatly stacked on her desk and her court attire ready the night before. Today, however, Sarah wasn't heading to the federal courthouse where she commanded respect as an assistant U.S. attorney. Instead, she was dealing with a personal matter at the municipal court, disputing a parking ticket she believed was issued in error. She dressed more casually than usual, opting for a navy blazer over a white blouse and black pants. As she stood in front of the mirror, she pinned back her natural hair, which she had recently embraced after years of straightening it. At 35, her face reflected the determination that had helped her graduate at the top of her class from Howard Law School and secure her prestigious role at the U.S. Attorney's Office. Grabbing a banana and her travel mug of coffee, Sarah headed to her Mercedes, a reward for her hard work on a major corruption case. Despite noticing the surprised looks she often got as a young black woman driving such an expensive car, Sarah remained focused. She left home early to allow plenty of time for her court appearance. At 8:15 a.m., while navigating Atlanta's slow-moving traffic and listening to NPR, Sarah's car's Bluetooth system announced an incoming call. It was from her boss, the U.S. attorney himself. Her pulse quickened. Direct calls from him usually meant something urgent. "Sarah, I apologize for the early call," her boss began. "We have an issue with the Thompson trafficking case. The defense just filed a last-minute motion that could jeopardize our prosecution. I need your analysis immediately." The Thompson case was one of the biggest human trafficking cases in Georgia's history. Sarah pulled into a coffee shop's parking lot, opened her laptop, and connected to her phone's hotspot. As she reviewed the complex motion, time slipped away. When she glanced at her watch, it was 8:50 a.m., and she was still 10 minutes away from the municipal court. She quickly called her boss back, shared her initial analysis, and promised a more detailed review later. By the time she arrived at the municipal court at 9:10 a.m., she knew she would be late for her hearing. Sarah rushed toward the building, hoping to explain the delay. Unbeknownst to her, this seemingly minor tardiness would lead to an unforgettable confrontation. Judge William Barrett's courtroom was already in session. At 62, with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses, Judge Barrett was known for his strict rules and no-nonsense demeanor. The courtroom was busy with people there for minor violations like parking tickets and traffic infractions. Most of the early arrivals were white professionals dressed in business attire, which seemed to please the judge. At 9:15 a.m., Sarah entered the courtroom quietly, but Judge Barrett immediately stopped speaking and glared at her. "Step forward," he commanded sharply. Sarah walked to the podium, maintaining her professional composure. "You must be Sarah Collins, scheduled for 9 a.m., the judge said, emphasizing the time. "Do you think your time is more valuable than the court's time?" Before Sarah could explain, Judge Barrett launched into a lecture about punctuality and respect for the law. He barely looked at her, shuffling papers as he spoke. Earlier, a white businessman had arrived 5 minutes late, and the judge had barely noticed. "Your Honor, if I may explain," Sarah began calmly. "You may not," the judge interrupted. "I've heard every excuse in the book. Car trouble, traffic, personal emergencies, none of that matters here." He continued to chastise her, raising his voice with each sentence. Sarah stood silently, her hands folded in front of her, observing the judge's demeanor and tone. She noticed how he hadn't even reviewed her paperwork or credentials before making assumptions about her. Finally, Judge Barrett announced her punishment. "This court hereby fines you $500 for contempt," he said, his gavel coming down sharply. The fine was one of the highest he had issued for tardiness that year. Sarah remained calm, though her mind was racing. She had faced prejudice before, but this was different. This was an abuse of power happening in real time. Other defendants in the courtroom exchanged uneasy glances, aware of the judge's disparate treatment of late arrivals based on their race or status. "Do you understand the fine as I have explained it?" Judge Barrett asked. "Yes, Your Honor, I understand completely," Sarah replied evenly. Her tone revealed nothing, but she carefully documented every detail of the exchange. Judge Barrett, satisfied with what he perceived as submission, moved on to the next case. What he didn't realize was that Sarah was just getting started. Sarah opened her briefcase and pulled out a leather credential holder. The gold seal of the U.S. Department of Justice glinted in the sunlight streaming through the courtroom windows. "Your Honor," she said, her voice now carrying unmistakable authority, "I need to properly introduce myself for the record." She held up her credentials. "I am Assistant United States Attorney Sarah Collins, serving in the Northern District of Georgia." The courtroom fell silent. Judge Barrett froze, his face draining of color. Mrs. Thompson, the court clerk, stopped typing. Even the bailiff, James Wilson, couldn't suppress a small smile. "I apologize for my tardiness," Sarah continued, "but I was delayed by urgent matters related to the Thompson human trafficking case, which I'm sure Your Honor has heard about. I have written confirmation from the U.S. Attorney's Office if the court requires it." Judge Barrett stammered, trying to recover. "Attorney Collins, I had no idea." "My position should not matter, Your Honor," Sarah said firmly. "What matters is the equal application of justice." She placed her credentials on the podium and added, "I have also documented several concerning patterns in this morning's proceedings, including disparate treatment of defendants based on their race and perceived status." The judge's face turned red with embarrassment. He attempted to dismiss the fine, but Sarah declined. "The fine should remain," she said. "I will pay it as evidence of today's events. However, I propose that this court review its practices to ensure fairness for all defendants. This includes reviewing the past 6 months of contempt charges and conducting mandatory bias training for court personnel." The courtroom buzzed with energy. Defendants, court staff, and observers all recognized the significance of the moment. Judge Barrett, visibly shaken, mumbled something about reviewing the matter further. Sarah calmly wrote a check for the fine, handed it to the clerk, and left the courtroom with her head held high. By the afternoon, word of what had happened spread quickly through Atlanta's legal community. Sarah received messages from other attorneys sharing similar stories of bias in Judge Barrett's courtroom. "This isn't just about me," she told a colleague. "For every lawyer who faces this treatment, there are countless ordinary citizens who suffer in silence. This is about ensuring justice for everyone."